In honor of this game coming out of early access very recently, there are some basic helpful hints I thought I could provide. After several tests and trials by fire, I was able to narrow down some tips I wish I knew at the start of this little game. Don't be afraid to just get into this game and learn the same way I did. It isn't easy, and the appeal of this game is figuring things out. Though, if you're struggling with where to go or need some direction, then I'm here to help. You'll want to gather materials, increase your space, and get access to water and oxygen quickly to help advance your way to space. All these things seem simple once you look at it, but along with all the other things you need to look over, can tend to get overwhelming. Here are my top 10 tips and tricks to help you make it through the start of this game and get your bearings. Before you even get into the world, you must survive in your given 3 duplicates, which will be called dupes from now on, which is our first tip. To check your stats, as each dupe has different attributes, traits, interest, and stress reaction. These are all very important to the playthrough, as this can affect how they may build, if they can do certain jobs like building, or how they handle a stressful situation. What is one good thing to note is that the attributes, the long list here, can be changed, leveled up, but the traits that are either marked in red or green cannot. This should help with your selection. That way you can pick dupes that may not have a farming stat to be a farmer and let them grow in that. Traits to be on the lookout to avoid are ones like gastrophobia, meaning they cannot cook, which is a big no as cooking is the primary need in this game. Anemic, which causes your athletics to be -5, causing the worker to not really be an effective helper. Then you have bottomless stomach and mouth breather. I put them together because they kind of do the same thing but for different aspects. Bottomless stomach means your dupe will consume 50% to 100% more food, which makes it super challenging in late game when managing food stores. While the mouth breather consumes 50% to 100% more oxygen, causing it harder both in early and late game to start out, as oxygen is very limited till you start building the proper equipment to produce it. Not all traits are bad though, some are the opposite, like diver's lungs, which allows your dupe to survive on less oxygen, or caregiver, which helps with sick dupes. My top 3 attributes you should be on the lookout for while you watch for bad traits is to have good research to help improve your colony, digging to help expand your colony, and supply, which helps clean up all that expansion. This is because at the start you only have 3 dupes for a while, so you need a pretty stellar starting crew. Our next tip is placed here at the beginning, as it's good to be aware of it before you start out. That tip is to check out stress. Why so early do we need to look into this? It is one of the most important things to be aware of to keep your dupes sane and, of course, alive. As a stressed out dupe can sometimes destroy very important machines you work so hard on to get set up. In addition to that, if a dupe is stressed out, they could just pass out in their bed till they're no longer stressed out, or just not do tasks assigned to them. Since you only start out with 3 dupes, this makes it very hard if you get one that just won't work because they are stressed out. Good stress responses to be aware of when picking your dupes is binge eater, where they're gonna binge out on food. In fact, they will eat the entire food supply in your little colony. So if you don't have reserves ready to be picked up by your supply person, then you're out of luck as everyone starts to starve. Destructive is the one I mentioned where the dupe, once stressed out, will just inflict damage to the nearest structure or equipment. Sometimes that might be your oxygen supplier or your ladder to the food. This one is good to keep your eye on, as later in the game some equipment can cost more to repair than others. Another one that isn't too terrible that will affect your other dupes is Ugly Crier. This dupe will cause floods of water to rush in. This will give your dupes the unclean stats and make them all feel super uncomfortable. Last to be on the lookout is the Vomiter. This is the same as an Ugly Crier, but instead of just water, it's producing polluted water. In the beginning of the game, you're not going to be ready to handle this due to no means to get rid of that nasty water. While all of these are not going to start out maxed on stress, there are ones you want to keep an eye on when you pick your dupes. To help with stress, you can put up paintings, sculptures, potted plants, make sure their workstations are brightly lit, assign them to cots, assign them to mess tables, quality of food, plenty of oxygen, and one we'll discuss further on, which is to make rooms. Once you have the dupes, you will be there in your new little world. My biggest advice is to immediately pause what you're doing and do step 3, which is to check your surroundings. Check first to see where your nearest water supply is. Is that one right next to the grime and possible germs? The other one is way to the left and may not work? That's what you're trying to figure out. This game would be fun to just dive in, but one thing that Oxygen Not Included helps teach you is that patience pays off. As yes, you may be able to get started super quick and then later on have issues because you didn't build correctly or your piping isn't set correctly. There are different biomes you want to be on the lookout for. Digging into a chamber that has deadly gases when you're not ready for it means a new playthrough, cause yeah, your dupes are all dead now. Same goes for heat, high pressure fluids and gases, as this world isn't about just not having oxygen, but pretty much everything as the details get incredibly scientific, which leads to the next tip. Don't build too fast. As tip 4 is about simplicity, take your time. This isn't a race here, as the tortoise method is always the best way. This game is about patience and planning to let you expand in time. If you haven't played this game, then the biggest rule, no, the golden rule, is don't expand too fast, too early. As I'm sure you want to just build super quick, get everything set up and expand out. This is hard to do without a ton of duplicates. Sometimes you'll have plants growing in each area that naturally produce seeds or food. Don't harvest those just yet, as they can be a good source of food till you get your farming all set up. Another thing to be on the lookout for is oxygenite, the mineral that produces oxygen. This naturally will disappear over time, so don't purposely build into it, as it's a good source of free oxygen at the start of the game. This means it isn't necessary to rush to build oxygen supplying equipment. This allows you a few cycles to build up so you can focus on other things like building the base. My tip I would say for building is to focus on your area first. Dig small spaces and expand out slowly. I usually build a top layer about 5 squares up to give room for any type of equipment that may be placed into that room. Don't worry too hard about placement, as this game is about finding your own base. It wouldn't be too much fun if we all had carbon copies of each other, so build your power plant at a lower level, but you may want to move it later cause heat rises and boy does that generator put off some heat. Then yeah, you can do that. In this game, you can create. Say you don't like this placement, deconstruct, get those resources back, and move to another area. While you're building your colony, you must be mindful of the gases in your area and what you produce. Tip 5 is watch your gas. Not, the stinky kind. Well, actually, maybe yes, the stinky kind. Gases in this game tend to act like gases do in real life. So carbon dioxide will fall due to being a heavy gas, while oxygen will stay up on top longer due to being lighter. Since this is just a tip for beginners, I won't divulge too much because a lot goes into gases later on. One trick I like to use, which helps with food, is that starting out your chest will be subject to diseases and spoiling. Well, one way to resolve one of those is to move your chest. I always make a pocket or a spot at the bottom of a colony to store the CO2 as it's heavy and floats down to the bottom. Dupes like us can't breathe in this, so you want to be careful how often they go down there. Now move that food storage into that bottom area where the CO2 is concentrating the highest. Once you do this, the food will no longer spoil. Yep, that's correct. No spoiling of food. Almost as good as having a refrigerator. Since this is a temporary solution, it doesn't get rid of germs, but it will help out a ton at the beginning. Another helpful trick, which will go into pipe flow later, is that your duplicates will produce some nasty stuff. Sorry, everyone poops. You need a place to put that. Most, I know, make a little room to store that nasty water. As there is a ton of polluted oxygen coming off this, you don't want your dupes to breathe that, unless they have to. Set up some pneumatic doors that will help close off the room effectively, keeping the gases in one room. Now, this isn't perfect, but it helps. Of course, starting out, you won't have access to these just yet, though starting out, you won't need to get rid of polluted water for quite a few cycles, but you do need to have a place for duplicates to use the facilities. The number 1 rooms you will need to build first are the bathroom and bedroom. Obviously not together, of course. On tip 6, we're going to talk about a few things. How to build a good bathroom, bedroom, and of course, how to make those rooms. There are a ton of things to be watching for this game. Of course, that's why you're watching this video, to help you with some minor things out of the way, One of the biggest thing people forget starting out is that dupes, like us, have bladders, and when they need to go, they don't hide away. Nope, they pee right where they are on that floor right there. And if you have multiple floors, well, that pee water is going to flow right on down those floors, getting all over everything, thus causing issues with your dupes walking through pee water, icky, pollution, and of course germs. To help with this, build an outhouse and wash basins. Since you're planning for the future, I like to build it on a single level at the start, maybe across from your duplicator. I put 3 outhouses in a row, and then 3 wash basins in a row right in front of those outhouses. Now, one neat trick is to build a door at the front. Since these are going to have 5 tiles high, it should be the space of 2 doors. I like to build down 2 slots with the wall, then place the door. If there are no open spots letting out anything, and it's a closed off room, then bingo, you've made your first room, the bathroom. For the first wash basin, I put both ways, meaning arrows point either way. This means the duplicate will wash their hands coming in and out. Then the other 2 wash basins I like to direct to the right if you build on the left side, and vice versa if you build on the right. That way, there are multiple ways for them to clean their hands on the way out and lessen their germs. Along with building the bathroom, you'll need a fresh water supply to of course help wash down the nasty. For now, a good pipe extractor will help get water out and to the toilet and wash basins. Later on, we'll discuss better methods to work with pipes. The floor above or near it, I like to build the bedroom. The bedroom is really important for stress relief. Once you build your bathroom, you may take one cycle and you can build your bedroom. Typically, I put 3 beds on the first floor till the bedroom is built to help them sleep, as they get negative effects when sleeping on the floor. Once you have a bathroom built, it is important to focus on the bedroom next, as this game is always about planning ahead so you're ready for any issues that may arise. I would build a bedroom with up to 4 to 5 beds. Yes, you start out with 3 dupes, but soon more arrive. To help with stress, and have your dupes not only build beds in the bedroom, but put lights, plants, and so much more in there, like more wall decor to help lower down any stress levels. Again, to help close this room off, you can either choose 2 doors or build a wall for 2 spaces and 1 door. Once you have that completed, you'll have your second room. Woohoo! You will now have a bedroom. You can hover over the room options to be able to see the benefits and stress reduction it provides. Plus, it will light up a different color to let you know. While building, you'll not be able to assign jobs, or skills is what they're called now, to your dupes till later on. To help with this, you can prioritize what your dupes choose to do over another thing. That's right, tip 7 is priorities. Do you got 'em? Make sure you assign one person to prioritize supply. This person will help to clean up and make sure the food is stocked. This is a huge need, especially with little hatches walking around eating what you don't pick up. Another big one is prioritize someone to dig more. This will help with expanding the base and clearing out areas for the next priority, which is building. You can't get to any of the next steps without equipment to propel you on. Since you picked your duplicates, hopefully to focus on these 3, you will not have any issues finding each duplicate who enjoys one option over the other. Priorities are something to keep in check, as some duplicates may love to dig, but have abilities that are better suited for farming. Really, this goes back to what you pick and how you stick with them throughout the game. Rather than using numbers to prioritize, you use arrows. The number of arrows means that a dupe will focus more on something over another thing. If they enjoy something, that box will have some purple hue to it. The darker it is, the more they enjoy it. To help, the arrow represents +10 to the priority of that duplicate doing something. So, if you have one duplicate that has 2 arrow dashes to say dig or build, and 1 to cook, they'll first focus on digging or building before making food, which is why it's important to have one main thing assigned to each dupe. You don't want them all to be hungry. Jobs/skills have since been moved to the printing pod. When wanting to assign a skill to a dupe, you'll see a hard hat show up at the printing pod. Click on the pod and click Duplicate Skills. Here, you can assign a skill to the dupe once they've gotten a skill point. They still get special bonuses when they get assigned a job/skill, and of course, it helps with the flow. Since this takes a while, it's important to let them prioritize first, before they get their first skill points, which leads us to our next big step. Once you have built the bathroom and the bedroom, and the next big step is to build your research station, as you won't get very far into this game without advancement. Before you can set up the research station, you need to be able to power it. Simply build a small generator. This typically is one that will have the dupes biking it to power it. I like to place up to 2 small batteries next to it so that they are not always biking and can do other things, as the power will be stored in the batteries for a small amount of time. Once the batteries are connected to the generator, you'll have a power source to help supply your miner equipment. The first of these, besides an oxygen generator, will need to be that research station. Typically, I like to have my research and power on upper levels due to the heat they generate. Once you have connected your generator to the research, take a duplicate proficient in the ways of research and prioritize them to research. Once you get to this stage, you'll have cleared out a significant area and be able to do this. In fact, you may have received your 4th dupe. Once you research, it's important to focus on basic farming first, as the food in the wild will probably have run out around this time, and you'll need your own food source, then power regulation to help unlock the standard battery, which is way more effective than the small batteries you initially have in the beginning. Another huge research is the piping, as this comes into play later, but it's best to add this on the list for your first researched items. Now that you have your researcher grinding away at getting the new ways to expand, it is important to start focusing on food, as tip 9 is to get yourself a small farm. Your first farm will consist of mealwood, not the most appetizing, but as you expand the base and upgrade farming options, you'll open up more pleasant food options. You start the game with about 20,000 kcal. Each duplicate takes about 1,000 kcal each cycle to be supported, so the first few cycles you'll not need to worry about food production. Once you unlock farming, you get the planter boxes, which will let you grow that mealwood. Now for the nitty-gritty. Make sure to place that farming lower down, as the mealwood doesn't need much in the way of stats to survive. I typically build a lower platform below the duplicator to be ready for my farm. Once I have it set up, I build 3 planter boxes per duplicate. That would come out to about 9 total if you still have the 3 you started out with, to maybe 12 if you got a 4th duplicate. Later on, some tiles produce more kcal, which allow you with better options. Though for now, this is a good starting area, as it's better to have too much food instead of not enough. If you placed your food in the CO2 bath I mentioned earlier, you'll not need to worry about your food spoiling for a while. Now, to make that mealwood into something, you won't be using the farmer for that. No, you need a cook. Once you get enough dupes, you should assign one to be the cook, or prioritize it if you haven't built a job or skill board yet. Once you get set up, you'll start producing the first food, which will be the microbe musher. Yuck, but hey, it's food that adds plus 500 kcal to your supply. The only issue is that this food uses a ton of water, and at this stage of the game, you haven't produced a renewable source of water, which comes way later. I would focus on working with 20 to start out, as if you do unlimited, the cook will just keep on cooking till there's no resources left, which isn't good if you're trying to save that precious water. The last tip will be more on the intermediate level, and that is piping. Since you start out with water that can't be renewed and water that is polluted, you need a way to get rid of that. The best option is one we mentioned of making a side room that is closed off to help drain out the bad water with a hand pump. It's good to look into plumbing, as this helps. First to upgrade your latrine area, then later on farming, and so much more. When you started out, you placed a hand-pumped water supply to help supply your water basin and toilets. You've probably noticed that at this point, the basin needs refill and maintenance. Since a dupe's time is incredibly important and we need them to focus on other tasks, this is where plumbing comes into play. We're only going to touch on this briefly, and maybe come back in a more in-depth look at this later on. What this helps with is no more manual upkeep to supply water to latrine areas. Once you have the option, it's best to research the bathroom, as it's way more effective with treating germs. For now, you will need to install a water pump in the same area you had your hand pump in, if there is still plenty of water in it. If not, you may need to find another source. Don't worry too much, as there are plenty in the opening area. Make sure to have the out direction on the bottom. Also, side note, the pump will need power, so make sure to build from the generator to the pump, The best method is to build along the flooring or walls. 1, it helps with decoration, which is important with stress. 2, it helps with clutter, which is also important with stress, because the dupes really don't enjoy a clutter-filled room. Make sure the bottom row or floor is the piping from the water coming from the water pump. This will be coming from the water to the new bathroom and sinks to help provide water. Typically, I like to play that out on the top floor or above the sink and bathroom. That way it can carry it out. You would then place an outsource in the polluted water area you previously built. There you go, a simple way to get started into pipe management. Don't worry, it only gets more complex from here. Oh, you are worried? Well, maybe next time we can provide a more in-depth tip and trick for piping and later level stuff. Thank you for watching my tips and tricks video on oxygen not included. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by leaving a like or a comment below. Let me know if these tips helped you, or maybe there's some tips you want me to look more into, or maybe tips you want me to add for another video. Of course, if you want to help the channel out, make sure you do subscribe. This is the Steel Grizzly, and I wish you luck with all your future games.